I've let go of what I did a lot when I was in my 20s, which is this exalting my teachers. And I mean, that comes with maturity, I think. It also comes with the changes in the times of the way yoga is taught, thank God. A lot of yoga teachers in the 90s really felt this drive to be aspirational and to be black and white about the way that they taught things. And there was a lot of like putting down flags like this is the right way and this is the way to do it. Hey everyone, I'm Andrea Ferretti and this is Yogaland. Hi Jason.
Hi, Andrea.
Hello Ginger.
Ginger is in my lap. Those of you watching this on YouTube, she is just having a day
Yeah.
where she needs human time.
Yes,
Yeah.
she needs to be very close. She
Yeah.
needs.
So, and you know what? I get it.
All right, so let's get started. We are going to talk today about, I think this is a great topic that you came up with, things we have let go of in our own personal yoga practice over the years.
We've been practicing yoga for a long time,
Long
Andrea.
time.
We're right at about that 30-year mark.
Yeah, we're at the 30
Right.
the 30-year mark.
And so we've gone through so many life changes. We've gone through so many technical changes. We've gone through so many different yoga phases,
Cultural changes.
And so we thought that we would have a couple of episodes where we reflect.
Right.
Yeah.
So this one's going to be the what we've let go of. And then the next one, lest it seem too negative to talk about the things we've let go of, we're going to do another one that's like things that have endured
Yeah.
over the last few decades of our practice.
Yeah.
Okay. So I did the outline. So I'm starting with me today. The very first thing I thought of when you brought up this topic, when we were sort of brainstorming, was I've let go of the idea of going to my edge in my poses. And there are a few reasons that has happened. One is that I am postmenopausal now. So my body is completely different and I'm not as flexible. And I know that I just can feel in my body that it wouldn't be wise to go. I used to have like a 180-degree Upavishta Konasana. I mean, it was insane.
Your forehead would bounce off the floor.
I was kind of
before
born,
you'd even feel your legs.
I was kind of born like that. I mean, I can't do that anymore. We'll just put it there. I also don't practice that way anymore, which is probably why I can't do it. I'm not, like I said, I'm not going all the way into my deepest flexibility. I think the other reason, and this is also related to age, is I'm trying to think more along the lines of longevity of my body. And I'm thinking of it quite a bit more holistically, which we'll kind of get to as we move through these points. And for me, to be more functional, I don't need to get more flexible. I need to get stronger.
I still do go to my edge in certain yoga poses or certain categories. And then there's other poses and categories where I back off to probably 60% of maximum intensity. So what I have really found over the years is that different movements in my body allow for my body can tolerate different degrees of intensity in different pose archetypes. So I can still really kind of go to my threshold in most outer hip opening, forward bends. I can still go to my effort threshold in arm balances. And I'm still teaching a ton, right? So there's a certain part of me that still feels like I need to continue to lean into my physical boundaries. Forward bends, standing pose, intensities, those I really still go to my maximum, but I feel like I do so with greater skill than I did in the past. But what I have found is I have never in my life felt good going to my maximum in back bends. And so that's really the family of poses that I go maximum 60%, 70%. I can't tell you the last time I even tried to do camel pose without being on the ball of my feet, because that edge doesn't have a soft boundary. That edge is an abrupt and undesirable place to live for me. And you brought up longevity, which is so important. There's something that happens, I think, over time where I just see like I don't recover like I used to. And so the the possibility of going too far and the knock-on effects of going too far are much greater than they used to be,
Right.
right?
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
And actually, when I reflect on my life over the last 30 years as a practitioner, going to my maximum in back bends has never felt good. And I remember going to advanced back bend master classes, especially at yoga journal conferences. I
Hmm.
would be teaching at a conference staff and I would go to like a master class on drop backs because I wanted to be able to do those poses so badly,
Hmm.
but they never turned out well.
Hmm.
They
Hmm.
never felt good in my body. So those are the ones for me I've really pulled way back on.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, yeah, if I had to think about categories, it's for me, I've pulled way back on my seated forward bends. So my Upavishta, my Paschimottanasana. I remember my Paschimottanasana I used to put like 2 or 3 blocks beyond my legs
So that
to
you could reach
so
forward
that
and
I could
hold.
actually feel something in my body. Don't need that anymore. I feel it. I definitely feel it. And I feel it at about 60 to 70%.
We're not going to do it now and we're not going to film it, but I want to see your forward bends. I want to see what you're talking about.
Okay.
I'm not going to, you're still going to go further than me. Guaranteed.
Okay.
Not that that's what it's about, but in all sincerity, I'm curious to see
Yeah.
how your ranges have changed.
But there are a lot of things. My point in bringing that up is there are a lot of things, like you said, where I'm still fully practicing, all my standing poses. I will say the other thing I do have to be more careful of is my like seated outer hip openers because I've been diagnosed. I have arthritis in my left knee, which has come up really since the hormonal changes of menopause and probably from years of, you know, cranking myself a bit too far in Lotus and things like that. So you live and learn, and
Yes.
that's just the way it is. And I guess I want to let people know out there who are younger and maybe thinking like, how does it feel for your practice to change that way? Feels totally fine. My
Totally.
ego is so much less attached. I'm still moving and healthy and doing as much as I possibly can to have a healthy body and a healthy mind. These little idiosyncratic issues of a pose here, a pose there, going this far, going that far, it it doesn't affect the quality of your everyday living or of your impression of like your identity.
I don't know the right way to say it. It feels, in a way, it feels like a relief to have less of an internalized performative pressure.
Hmm.
I still internalize stress and pressure about how my body looks and what I can do, but I do feel like I I I don't in any way suffer mentally, emotionally, or with my ego because I have realized that my body's not a real great deep backbender. It's more of a relief than a stress, if
Mm,
anything, for
right.
sure.
Well, we both gave it the old college try, that's for sure, with the
Tried it for a
poses
long
that
time.
I also gave up. We were talking yesterday when we were planning this podcast. I gave up on the full Ekapada Rajakapotasana series, the full pigeon series. I actually thought for a while that I would maybe be able to do, I think it was D or 4, the one where you're in Hanumanasana with the
Mm,
front leg, because I have such a deep Hanumanasana. But no, that really only led to sacral pain.
yeah.
So we gave it the try. We both still have dreams that we reach our foot to our head, and we've both talked about this.
Literally dreams.
Yeah,
Like
actual
literally everybody,
dreams.
we have actual dreams that we can hold our foot. For me, it's in Natarajasana.
Okay, for me, it's always pigeon.
Oh, for me, it's Natarajasana.
Okay.
And I remember the most recent one I had was I was standing on the bed of one of those full Pilates Cadillac machines that has like the
Oh,
bars
okay.
up here.
Yeah.
And I was just kind of stretching out and I put my foot in one of the loops
Uh-huh.
behind me. And then I was like, oh my God, it's
Oh,
right there. it's right there. And
we
I was
both
like,
have the same dream.
this isn't difficult
It's
at
so
all.
funny. Mine is always same thing. Like I reach back for my foot and I'm like, oh my gosh, I knew I could do this. And then I pull it and pull it and it's like on my forehead. It's always like comes ridiculously far. And it's like, oh, I always knew this was there. And then that's it. I wake up and whenever I tell you I have that dream, you're like, I have a similar dream.
Yeah.
So yeah, we had those dreams. Those dreams are gone and that's okay.
So the broader topic is we've let go of really working our edge, especially our edge of flexibility, not
Yeah.
necessarily our edge of strength and conditioning, but our edge of flexibility and range of motion. And specifically for me, I've really lost like the back bend, like leaning into doing specific difficult poses.
Right.
And for you with specific difficult poses, you've let go of the idea of like doing the
full
pigeon
expression
series.
of the pose, right? Like
Yeah,
I can
the
still do it
holding
with
the
a
foot,
strap,
arm
but
overhead.
yeah,
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 we
yeah.
can still use a strap.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So the next thing that I think we've both let go of, I don't know how much more attached to it. If you may have been less attached to it than I was, but it's this idea that cross training is bad. And I'll share the story that I shared with you yesterday, which is not a story I'm super proud of, but it's a true story, which is I remember being in an editorial meeting years ago at Yoga Journal and one of the editors saying, why don't we were talking about chaturanga and she said, well, why don't we do a story about, how you could maybe use weightlifting to get strong enough to do chaturanga. And I looked at her like she had four heads. I was like, uh, no. You just to do chaturanga, you just learn to do chaturanga and you just do chaturanga. And I mean, that was definitely the mindset of that time period, right? It was a little bit of a snobby thing. It was, yeah, like I'm not a gym rat. Okay. I'm a little more elegant than that and a little more aware of my body than that. And it was also the idea of the time that to get better at yoga, you did more yoga. And that all of our isometric strength was enough. And again, times change, research changes. And quite frankly, I always knew I wasn't that strong. I always knew. And when I started to get more and more injured throughout periods of my yoga practice, the things that would feel better would be if I went to PT, it would be strengthening. So I did always kind of know that. I just didn't really want to, I didn't think that mixing the two made sense.
It, I agree, and I think we should unpack this a little bit. I
Mhm.
think there's two ways where we from a certain generation struggled with the idea that we could or should mix other forms of movement with our asana practice.
Mhm.
One was, I think, as our generation, we believed that the physicality of yoga was in some way superior to other modalities of physicality,
Right.
and that it was always enough for everyone, regardless of what they wanted to cultivate.
Right.
Right. And I think it's normal at times to be afraid that the thing you love isn't enough. And I think I think the physicality of yoga is absolutely enough for most people to be well, depending on their practice. But going back to this idea of using a strength training modality just to prepare your body to do a yoga thing made it seem to our mind like yoga wasn't enough to
Mhm.
do the yoga thing.
Mhm.
And I think that betrayed our extreme enthusiasm and black and white thinking
Mhm.
about practice,
Mhm.
right?
Right.
I think the other thing was that every generation, I think, believes that they are the standard bearer for for their culture or their belief system or their community. And I feel like, especially in the 90s, people don't really realize how segmented yoga still was, how very little cross pollination
Oh
there
yeah.
was amongst different schools of yoga, let alone yoga and other movement modalities.
Right.
Everything was profoundly siloed, right? And so, this idea that you would be a yoga practitioner and you would use a different modality to support your yoga practice was antithetical to the to many of our um to many of our ideological perspectives.
Felt like
It
blasphemy.
felt like blasphemy. That's
And I mean,
much more clearly said.
to be fair, it was a time, I mean, I remember before I did yoga, I tried going to the gym and there were not a lot of women in the weight room and women were not trained to do weights. And so I was bored and I
Okay,
tried to do weights and guys would just ask me out and I was disgusted because there were no other women there.
okay. There's another thing I want to say, which is a lot of the weightlifting in the 90s or the strength training in the 90s was really not evolved.
Yeah.
It was really gym ratty. It was really isolation based exercises. So that's actually, I hadn't thought about it till this conversation. For me now, like, I just got to go see the Los Angeles Clippers, the NBA teams. I got to see their fitness facility. There was not one machine in that facility. Okay. Multi-billion-dollar facility, not one machine. You
They didn't even have cables?
They had cables, but
Oh, okay.
no like fixed, no like pull up, like lat pull down machine or like
Gotcha.
leg extension
Okay.
machine. The skill level and intelligence of the way that people at high level do strength training and resistance training now is actually much more sophisticated in the way that yoga asana has been sophisticated for a long time,
Right.
right? So strength training and gym culture has evolved so much over the last 30 years
Mhm.
that it is a much more intelligent and inviting place. It's much more conducive to a yoga practitioner's whole body integrated movement mindset
Yeah.
than it was back in the day, let alone, you going to what culturally didn't feel like a supportive
I did not
location.
feel welcome.
Yeah.
I did not feel like there was any way to educate myself. There wasn't YouTube. I'm sounding so old now. But it's just, it just really was a different culture. Whereas I went into the yoga room and the teacher taught us how to do things and took their time and made everybody feel welcome. And of course, there were a lot more women there too. So I do think, and so it was so much more mentally engaging to me because I wasn't just off on my own. And I really wasn't an aerobics type. I did a little bit of dance classes, but then I was sort of past my dance prime. So I didn't feel great about myself in dance classes anymore. Um, so yeah, all of those things contributed to that as well.
Yeah. Real quick, before we continue with the episode, this channel is 100% supported by teachers and students like yourself. So I want to let you know about 3 things that are coming up that you might be interested in. First, my all online spine and core module is about to kick off. It begins August 20th. It's part of my 300-hour advanced teacher training program, and I would love for you to join. The information is below. Second, in early October, I'll be doing a 5-day in-person training in London. The training is called Sequencing 2.0, and it's really about moving beyond just teaching drop-in classes. It's about learning how to sequence and create workshops, series, short formats, online content, and also how to develop curriculum so your drop-in classes are more cohesive and compelling. Finally, for those of you interested in becoming a yoga teacher or learning more about the process, my online 200-hour teacher training program launches in January of 2026, but registration is going to begin in September of this year, and you'll have full access to the content at that point. So everybody, check all the links below. And once again, thanks for listening to this episode.
So I wonder if you want to talk about a related thing that we mentioned yesterday, which is this idea that you were told strength isn't that important.
Yeah, so this is really interesting. I spent over a decade mostly in the Iyengar world. And Iyengar studies, practitioners, students, and so forth, have a very intense and fierce physicality. the physicality of the Iyengar yoga tradition is not particularly soft. It's very technical, it's
Disciplined.
very disciplined, it's very intense, physically intense, intellectually intense, depending on who the teacher is, emotionally intense, right? It is, I'm not in any way undermining the intensity or the value of the physicality in that modality. But I also study with a lot of very post Iyengar teachers: Rodney Yee, Richard Rosen, Mary Piffard, Patricia Sullivan, Ramanan Patel. Ramanan was still in the tradition at the time. And there was such an emphasis on bones.
Aligning the bones. That's right.
Yes. There's such an alignment on
That's
bones,
right.
technique, geometry, architecture, that there wasn't much of an emphasis on strength.
Well, because the idea was, tell them what the idea was, that if you align the bones, you would just build strength.
Yeah. So when you are in your when you okay, imagine that I'm in a really pristine headstand compared to imagine I'm in a like kind of misaligned
Sure, you're
headstand.
in like a banana shape.
Right. Which one of those am I going to have to use more muscular strength? I'm going to have to use more muscular strength in the poorly aligned pose,
Mhm.
because in the poorly aligned pose, you have so much inefficiency that your structure isn't carrying you skillfully. So to this day, for me in headstand, I actually don't need much strength because just like standing, ideally standing, you can stand in such a way where you don't have to work hard to stand. If you're working hard to stand, something's wrong. So this was kind of the mindset across the whole spectrum, is that if in any pose you're having to effort it or muscle it, then something's wrong. And in a way, I don't disagree with that. But what that translated to is therefore strength is not very important,
Hmm.
right? So, and again, I'm not saying that I think you should have to muscle your way through poses. I think I think there's a lot of intelligence in the idea that a good, clean, skillfully articulated posture has a state of equilibrium and is organized so well that no one thing has to work really, 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 really hard. I actually kind of agree with that. But that also can quickly convey that being strong and muscularly robust is therefore not a priority,
Mhm.
is therefore not actually valuable. And I think that secondary mindset is inaccurate,
Mhm.
especially now that we are both past 50,
Mhm. Mhm.
right? Because the reality is we need strength for our body just to move well on a daily
We're
basis,
already starting to feel it.
right? I
Yeah.
mean, we don't shoot
You
this podcast first thing in the morning, do we?
no.
Right? We're trying to move around,
Yeah.
right? And so from a technique perspective, from my perspective, ideally, most poses, you don't have to you don't have to have an extreme amount of effort to survive the pose. Like, you should really be articulate. At the same time, strength is really important.
Right.
That both of these things are beneficial. And I would see this, I see this a lot in the jujitsu community too, right? Because there's the notion, and it is a true notion, that technique wins over technique wins over power. We- And one of the things training where I train, we're literally ringed by powerlifting gyms. And so people will come over all the time that aren't trained, but who are really, really strong. And they will be decimated
Mhm.
by like a 15-year-old girl
Mhm.
because they're not trained. They don't know how to fight. But that mindset can lead to, oh, well, strength doesn't matter.
Mhm.
But strength does matter, because if you take two people who are equally trained, the stronger one's going to win,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And so, there's one more part to this, which is a lot of times it takes a certain amount of strength and conditioning to actually do the technique well. And so I guess the bottom line here that we want to articulate, that what we've let go of, is that strength doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Absolutely, strength matters.
Yes.
Absolutely,
And
strength
and the
matters.
older you get, almost the more it matters because of sarcopenia, because humans lose muscle as they age. And, I feel like as you go into your elderly years, falls are a huge cause of death. I don't know the statistics, but it's because people can't get up
Yes.
or because you don't have the bone strength. And the more you strength train, the stronger your bones get. There's just so many things. Like, think about lifting your groceries up and putting them in your car and then lifting them up the stairs and then getting things off of a counter. I watch your mom and dad, they take care of their yard and they've always done it themselves. And it's a huge yard and they're like avid gardeners. And your mom drags 40-pound bags of birdseed outside every day to feed the birds. And she's 76 years old. And it's not a problem for her
Yeah.
because she's maintained her strength.
I want to really quickly, I think I can do this in 2 minutes, articulate why strength is so important from a safety perspective,
Sure.
which is strength dissipates stress.
Mm.
Strength absorbs and distributes stress so that stress isn't as concentrated. You can kind of think about strength as a buffer. And so sometimes people will shorthand it and talk about strength is a stabilizer, right? Strength gives us stability, and stability is important. And yes, stability is important and strength provides it. But why is stability important? Because the body doesn't want any extreme jarring motion or overly concentrated force. When the body's subject, think about a fall. If I fall, there's a sharp, reactive, concentrated stress that's going to be shocked into whatever part of the body makes contact with the ground. If my whole body is really strong, then that shock is going to be distributed and absorbed by tissues that can handle the stress.
Mm.
But if my body doesn't have strength, if my body can't absorb that local stress, then that shock is not going to be dissipated anywhere. And that shock is going to create more perturbations or more reverberations upward through the system, right? And so this is why any mechanical components needs to have a certain amount of strength in order to distribute those shocks. And the final thing I want to say, and we'll move on to the next topic, is, and of course, flexibility matters, but we don't need to worry in a conversation about yoga that we're not going to do things that promote flexibility, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I just wanted to throw that in.
I
got
love
excited.
how you feel like you need to rush when you're adding a point.
Well, I can go on.
Yes. Okay. I want you to talk about some verbal cues you've let go of. These are fun.
There are so many verbal cues that I've let go of.
We've talked about them a lot over the years, but it's always fun to go
There
over
are
them.
3 that just really come to mind, and I gave them so many times for so long, and I was so wrong. Number 1, don't engage your glutes and back bends.
That one makes me giggle.
Actually, worse. Engaging your glutes and back bends will hurt your lower back, will compress your lower back. This, we could have, I think we actually have podcasts on this. If we do somewhere, I'll link it.
I think we do.
But I'm just going to say this. That's not true. None of those things are true. It doesn't make sense. It's literally like saying, don't engage your biceps. It will hurt your shoulder.
Right. It brings to mind this vision of like you squeeze your little booty and it squishes the bones together.
Yeah, like
something like that. It compresses the sacral plate.
Does not compress the sacrum.
Yeah.
It doesn't. Muscular engagement in and of itself is not a threat to the body.
Yeah.
Going too far in a yoga pose is a threat to the body. Number 2, square your hips in Warrior 1. Now, for me, this isn't as technically incongruous with reality, but I did just do a YouTube video on it. So I'm going to link it here. I'll link it into the video. Those of you that are watching on YouTube, I'll put it here. If you are listening to this just as a podcast, then you can go to
I'll,
Jason Crandall Yoga, and you go to the YouTube channel.
yeah,
There's a recent video on it. The word square is very problematic because in order to get the hips square in a warrior one position, you have to take this diminutive stride, and there's no mechanical reason. It would be like this. My heels do not come to the floor in triangle pose. Sorry,
I was like,
they do come to the
really?
floor. They do,
Wow.
yeah.
It's those tiny little
Yeah, no,
heels.
I do triangle pose on the no, my heels don't. Okay, everybody, my heels don't come to the floor in down dog
Got it.
because of the shape of my ankle and the tightness of my calves. For me to bring my heels to the floor and in triangle, oh my God, for me to bring my heels to the floor
In
in
down
down
dog.
dog, I would have to sacrifice all these other things. I'd have to take this like horrible little stride. I would be getting my heels to the floor, but I'd take this horrible little stride. Everything else would be off. To get the hips truly square in Warrior One, everybody has to make almost everything else about the pose wrong. So you're in the action of rotating the hips forward towards the front leg, but you're not going to get them actually square. And then the counterpoint to this, 1996 calls, it wants its cue back. Wedge your hips between two panes of glass
In
in Warrior
triangle
2
pose.
and Triangle Pose. The problem with these cues is how literal they are and how literal those specific cues are incongruous with mechanical reality. Does that make sense how I'm saying
Sure.
that?
I think
Because
so.
because two panes of glass, the thing that's great about two panes of glass, imagine you're wedging your hips between two panes of glass. The perfect thing about that is that that gives you a very literal thing to do. But that literal thing does not happen in a human body. And so it leads to two things, sometimes three. Number one, trying to put a circle into a square, which is never going to happen. So we always have some discontent with our ability to do the pose because we're trying to do a literal thing that literally doesn't happen because the pelvis can't laterally rotate on the femur that much. The second thing that it often does is it can have people create a lot of lower back or sacroiliac stress because they're trying to rotate the hips so much past the threshold that they can actually go. And then the final thing that can happen is we just don't like the pose
Yeah.
because we just feel like I'm not even doing this pose the way it's supposed to be done because I have a literal image that can't literally be replicated.
One is it calls to mind this adage that I've heard in parenting circles. When you know better, you do better. Right? It's like we don't look back at these cues or doing these things with, wringing our hands and but with tons of regret. But it's like we know better, we do better. And the second thing is, um, pretty sure that cue was largely responsible for probably 2 years of sacroiliac pain for me because I am really that is one that sort of external rotation and hamstring stretch is a strength for me in terms of my natural flexibility. So I would grind that hip open, man, and I would like grind into the bottom sacral joint and just I would feel my acetabulum, like my thigh bone in the socket. I've heard you can actually even kind of weaken your labrum or tear your labrum that by doing that. And I'm lucky that didn't happen. But yeah, I think that one was a real culprit that I didn't feel when I was in the pose, which is interesting. There are things that you really feel when you get injured. That was one that never felt bad to me. But when I started doing it, uh, a more natural way, man, everything felt so much better.
Yeah, for sure.
The last point was one that I brought up, but I think you agreed, which is I've let go of what I did a lot when I was in my 20s, which is this exalting my teachers. And I mean, that comes with maturity, I think. It also comes with the changes in the times of the way yoga is taught, thank God. Uh, I feel like a lot of yoga teachers in the 90s really felt this drive to be aspirational and to be and to be black and white about the way that they taught things. And there was a lot of like putting flags, putting down flags like this is the right way and this is the way to do it. And then I would go to someone else and like this would be the right way and this would be the right way to do it. And then I would be mad at that teacher, or I think that teacher like really didn't know what they were talking about. Or I didn't trust that teacher anymore. And then I went to this teacher. I felt very confused. I also think part of this is my own personality, so I'll own it. But I also think it took me a really long time to feel self empowered in my practice, not just my physical practice, but also in my um, mental, emotional, spiritual practice. So if we think of yoga as a state of being, I think I really outsourced like, okay, well, that teacher says that this is what the state of being feels like, or this is what it's like, or this is what it is. That teacher has it. I don't have it. I haven't gotten there yet. And I don't feel that way anymore. Maybe it's from practicing longer. Maybe it is from going through all those different experiments. Maybe it's maturity. A lot of it, I think, is that things have changed in the way that we take in information. There's so much information now in the world that I think we've all become a lot more discerning. Well, maybe not all of us, but
Not everybody.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Why do you think it's so important?
Good question. I think it's really important because I think it's really, first of all, it's just not beneficial and it's potentially dangerous to outsource your inner experience to any other person and to always be deferential to someone else. We're all humans. Nobody really knows anything more than anyone else, quite honestly, about consciousness and the state of being in the world and the meaning of life. So you and I both lived through a lot of falls from grace of yoga communities, individual teachers, um, and we've seen it happen. And I think we're both really fortunate that we haven't really suffered abuses from our own teachers, but we've seen it happen. It's not um it's not safe to do that. And I'm not at all victim blaming.
No,
I
no,
think
no, no,
I
of course
think
not.
I didn't know if that last thing I said just sounded like
Mm,
that.
I don't think so, but
Yeah.
good to clarify it
Yeah.
regardless. You
Yeah.
never know.
I'm more encouraging teachers to feel like they don't have to take on some role as some a spiritual adept or some aspirational perfect being. I just don't think that that's needed.
I think it's important to spend a moment painting a little picture of the yoga worlds 30 years ago from our experience, just on this particular topic. And the first thing that I want to say, and I said this earlier, is yoga was extremely siloed and it was harder to find.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So that's the first thing to understand, is it was much harder to find yoga. You had to go to studios.
Mm-hmm.
Gyms didn't really have it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So you had to go to studios, you had to seek it out. And the different styles were much more siloed. It wasn't like, oh, I'm going to do an Ashtanga class and then I'm going to do a Yin class and then I'm going to do an Iyengar.
Mm-mm.
And there weren't many teachers. I mean, it was starting to happen with some of the Anyasara was doing some cross pollination of style. Yoga Works, Chuck and Mati were doing some cross
Right.
pollination of
That's
style
when it started
really, really
really.
well,
Mm-hmm.
right? But for the most part, you there weren't as many teachers. It was a lot harder to find yoga. Each individual yoga studio was more siloed off and had in my experience, a much more specific hierarchy. And there's another thing to remember on this, and there's upsides to this and downsides to this, but I, I if I want to find out who are the teachers of the popular teachers or influencers on Instagram or yoga or YouTube, I don't know how to do that anymore.
I know, it's so funny, isn't
It's not
it?
in bios. So the bio, everybody, the bio always was about lineage.
Yeah.
It was the first sentence. Jason Crandall studied with Rodney Yee, Richard Rosen, Merrick Fard, Patricia Sullivan, Ramanan Patel.
Yeah.
He brings boom, 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 right? So again, there are some upsides to those. But I think that in that era, those qualities or those attributes lent themselves to the person. If we found yoga, if we did everything we need to do to find yoga, and we saw this like subculture that was like its own thing, and it had its own world, and it had its own pecking order, and you know who was who,
And it had
and
its own language.
it had its own language, and it even had, you know, for like in the world at Piedmont Yoga Studio for Rodney, it had like, I assisted Rodney later on, but also Rodney had for a long time the people that would demonstrate for Rodney, right? So
There was a lot of that.
it was almost like if you loved a band, there was like the roadies of the band and then the band members, and you know what I mean? And so I think what this led to was more true believerism,
Mm.
right? And I think that's in part of what you're pushing back against is we still have a ton of care and respect for teachers. We are both teachers. I have tons of care and respect for my colleagues and my teachers, but I feel like there is much less of the black and white trappings that there was going to be someone that had all the right answers
Right.
and that they were going to transmit singular truth, right? And so I think a big part of this is we just don't have the same black and white thinking,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then the last thing along these lines is you worked behind the scenes at Yoga Journal for 15 years. There's no way, having worked with everyone you worked with, that you at the end of the day are going to believe that anybody is the single representative of the truth
Mm-hmm.
because you've either talked to them too much or their brand manager too much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say having that experience, I realized that many of them had great pieces of the truth.
For sure.
And I also realized that many of them were closed off, even with me, about the reality of their day-to-day lives because they didn't want to show that they were actually human. They really did want to be like hold themselves above their students. And they considered me sort of a student because I was, writing about them.
I think there's probably still a lot of this that happens, Andrea.
Well, that's why I wanted to talk about it.
But I think that you and I we're not around it anymore,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And I actually want to pull on this thread a little bit, which is I wouldn't be here now without those teachers and those communities,
No, 100%.
right?
Yeah.
And I learned so much from many people in those communities and with those teachers. And there's also something wonderful about having had the opportunity to practice in the era that you did have to seek it out
Yeah.
more,
It was.
that it was harder to practice, that you did have to do 2-hour classes and you did have to it was a calendar appointment,
Mm-hmm.
right? There was a certain intensity to that world. And there were upsides to the intensity and the single focus of it. And I will say that the teachers, and I'm only going to speak to the teachers that I knew directly or peripherally, which is all of them that I can think of put their time in, and they were really good at what they did.
Yeah.
They excelled in a way, not necessarily because they had charisma and a marketing plan, but because they just, it maybe in a way they were more true believers.
Yes, probably. Probably. And they're incredibly devoted.
That's a better word
It's a
for it.
lot of
Yeah.
devotion.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which was beautiful. It's
And these
interesting.
things have shadow sides,
Right.
everything
does.
which everything does. And I'm willing to see both of the sides of it. And I'm also willing to say, I'm glad we've moved on from certain things, but I'm not going to pretend that I didn't gain and get value from some of the things, right? I'm not going to pretend like, oh, well, this was just a bad thing and I was never part of it. No, I benefited from parts of it too. So we're going to circle back and we're going to talk about the things that we have happily not let go of.
Yes.
That have really been
Enduring.
And then I think we should do a bonus episode that's just a little more fun about practicing in the 90s.
In the 90s.
Is
it Kevin Thornton?
Kevin James.
I'm going to put him in the show notes.
Okay.
He's a guy on Instagram who does these jokes, and then he always does this. He puts his finger to his ear and he goes, in the 90s, because he tells stories from the 90s and they're hysterical.
Yeah. Yeah.
So he's worth listening to.
We have some good paint a picture. This is what it was like.
Yeah. They're fun.
Okay.
Thank you, Jason. Thanks everyone for listening. Ginger is out. Her snoot is pressed against
I don't know if I think she's below camera. We'll see.
The chair. She is thoroughly bored by our conversation. We hope you weren't. I'll put show notes. I believe it's
unless you wanted to be, because you wanted to listen to us while you fell asleep. Right. Some of my favorite podcasts I listen to go to sleep.
But I think we laugh too loud in certain places.
That's true. That's annoying.
Okay. We've got some show notes for this episode, so I will put them. I believe it is yogalandpodcast.com/episode 364. All right, everyone. Until next week, enjoy your practice.